to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which sets internationally binding emission reduction targets. It was adopted in Kyoto in Japan on the 11th of December in 1997, and hence the name Kyoto Protocol. It entered into force on February 16th in the year 2005. The ultimate objective of the convention is to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that will prevent dangerous human interference with the climate system. Countries who are part of the protocol are referred to as parties. There are two groups of parties. One is the Annex I countries that consist of developed countries, and then there are the non-Annex I countries that consist of developing economies. At present, there are 197 parties to the convention. The official meeting of all the parties to the Kyoto Protocol is called the Conference of the Parties, or COP. This meet is usually part of the United Nations Climate Change Conference. Their central aim is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by reviewing the commitments to reduce emissions and amend it as necessary. The first commitment period was between the year 2008 and 2012. The second commitment period was between 2013 to 2020. Parties have committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 18% below 1990 levels. This is also referred to as the Doha Amendment. Only the countries that you can see on the map here have agreed to emission reduction during the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. This group of countries, including those in Annex I, are called the Annex B countries. There are 6 main greenhouse gases that are identified to be controlled under the Kyoto Protocol. Every country that has ratified the Kyoto Protocol has been assigned an emissions target over the commitment period in order to comply with the protocol. This fixed level of emissions is called a party's assigned amount. Countries have to ensure that they meet their commitments and not exceed the emissions target to comply with the protocol. Once these targets are met, parties need to submit the reports to the governing bodies. Annex I parties need to report about their emissions reductions annually, while non-Annex I parties are required to submit their first report within 3 years of entering the convention and every 4 years thereafter. How exactly can a country reduce their emissions? How does the Kyoto Protocol play a role in that? Under the protocol, countries must meet their targets primarily through national measures. However, the protocol also offers them an additional means to meet their targets by way of 3 market-based mechanisms. To help countries meet their emission targets and to encourage the private sector and developing countries to contribute to emission reduction efforts, negotiators of the protocol included 3 market-based mechanisms. They are the Clean Development Mechanism, Joint Implementation, and International Emission Trading. The Kyoto mechanisms stimulate sustainable development through technology transfer and investment. They also help countries with Kyoto commitments to meet their targets by reducing emissions or removing carbon from the atmosphere in other countries in a cost effective manner. Finally, they encourage the private sector and developing countries to contribute to emission reduction efforts. CDM and GI are the two project-based mechanisms which feed the carbon market. CDM involves investment in emission reduction or removal enhancement projects in developing countries that contribute to their sustainable development, while GI enables developed countries to carry out emission reduction or removal enhancement projects in other developed countries. The global community in December 2015 adopted another agreement in Paris, which is meant for being operationalized post the year 2020, that is, at the end of the Kyoto Protocol's second commitment period. This agreement is called Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement's central aim is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping global temperature rise this century well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. It also seeks to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The Paris Agreement charts a new course in global climate effort, as for the very first time countries will set their own targets for emission reduction. While Kyoto Protocol assigned fixed levels of permitted emissions to countries, the Paris Agreement requires countries to chart out their own action plan, called Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs. There will also be a global stocktake every 5 years to assess the collective progress towards achieving the purpose of the agreement, that is, keeping global temperatures well under 2 degrees Celsius, as well as informing further individual actions by the parties. More recently, COP23, presided by Fiji, was held at Bonn in November 2017. COP23 advanced the implementation guidelines of the Paris Agreement to enable countries to collectively move closer to the more ambitious Paris Agreement goals. COP24 in 2018 will decide the fate of Kyoto Protocol's market-based mechanisms. In the next modules, you'll further understand these mechanisms and their global impacts.